Well guys, it's time for another OOTP project. You know that I can't stay away. Yeah, there are some things I can't stand about this game. However, it was made just for projects like this one. I don't think that there's any game that can handle major rebuilds quite like OOTP. Now, I know about Baseball Mogul and I've played it in the past. In fact, I'm planning on playing around with it a little bit again here in the near future. But as much fun as Baseball Mogul is, it really isn't quite as deep or as wide open as OOTP. Our challenge today we're going to rebuild the 1993 Mets. As chronicled in this excellent post on Amazing Avenue, which I've linked to in the description, the 1993 Mets might not have been the worst Mets team of all time, but they sure felt like it. The start of the decline of the Mets came right after the 1986 World Series ended. The Mets made two major personnel decisions during that offseason. The team decided not to extend Ray Knight's contract despite the fact that he had just won the World Series MVP award. Then, a few weeks later, the Mets decided to ship off Kevin Mitchell to San Diego. That was part of a package deal to get Kevin McReynolds. That Amazing Avenue blog post, which by the way is now a decade old, describes it best. That trade marked a complete change in thinking of the Mets. The team went away from building mostly around homegrown talent and further towards free agent signings and players that were developed by other teams. A lot of the problems left over from 1986 were due to management. For example, the ridiculous decision to platoon Lenny Dykstra and Mookie Wilson in center field.
Mookie on his way to third, and he goes in with a three-base hit. And the Mets lead by a score of 6.
By the end of the 1980s, Dykstra was gone, and the Mets were trying to get second baseman Juan Samuel to play in center. Not long after that, the Mets brought in Vince Coleman as a free agent. That began the era of Mets' major free agent signings. Okay, I think that the logic here has something to do with the Mets being in New York and therefore having some sort of duty to spend big money on big names. I mean, that's what the Yankees have always been doing, right? And boy, did they ever spend. An aging Eddie Murray came over next. And so did Bobby Bonilla. This was a year before Bonds left Pittsburgh. And then the Mets traded for an aging Brett Saberhagen. The result? The result was the 1993 New York Mets. They were a bad team that only got worse as time went on. 1993 was famous. That was the year that Bobby Bonilla feuded with New York Daily News writer Bob Klapisch.
I know you're feeling an itch. Make your move, partner. Because I'll hurt you. You fighting me? Whatever, you take it as you see. It's just, you know, like the homeboy said back home, we just chilling. Make your move.
Of course, Klapisch did write a book about the 1992 Mets called The Worst Team Money Could Buy. I can see why Bonilla was upset. However, Bonilla's tirades against the media were clearly out of line.
Pretty much, for Bonilla, it's a normal vocabulary. You got a problem with that? No, not much, but well, if you touch me. Well, come on, you make it. No, I'm not going to.
1993 was the season Vince Coleman decided to launch a large explosive into a crowd of autograph seekers. That was a move that eventually resulted in him leaving the team. This was also the season that pitcher Anthony Young lost 27 games in a row. In the end, the Mets finished with a 59-103 record. That was good enough for last in the National League East behind the expansion Florida Marlins. Yeah, you can probably guess where I'm going with this. It's time for a rebuild. Let's see what we can do with the most infamous Mets team of all time. First of all, I should note that I set talent change randomness up to 200 for this project. This was just for fun. I also turned off OOTP's recalculation system. See, with recalculation on, players kind of stick towards what they did in real life. When you turn it off, you're guaranteed basically that they would develop differently than they did in real life. I'm starting to think that this is actually necessary for this kind of save, because otherwise you have a major advantage. I mean, you know what happened. If you know how players are going to develop ahead of time, it's easy to just get the right guys and sit back and wait. Now, when I started to look over this team, I realized something. Bonilla is actually one of the best players on the team, and he's really not the sort of player that you want to trade right away. In fact, Bobby has a fan favorite personality and apparently has low financial ambition. Yeah, I'm not sure where those ratings come from. I don't know how that's justified. Anyway, I didn't want to trade him, so we held on to him. Our list of top prospects was also kind of underwhelming. I came into this project expecting to do a multi-year rebuild project the right way. You know, that's where you get rid of your free agents and get rid of the ugly salaries and you build a team around youth alone. They call it Moneyball, right? But, well, things didn't quite go that way in the end here. The problem is that I fondly remember baseball from the mid-1990s. And so when I had the chance to trade to get Roberto Alomar, I didn't think twice, no matter what his contract looked like. It felt good to trade for an all-star. The fans loved it too. I even got Toronto to take on part of his contract. Now, just so you know, he is a legitimately good player. I didn't get screwed. The biggest problem is that he was in his final contract year. Tony Fernandez was good, but seriously, he can't compare with Alomar. And Burnitz was a dime a dozen player. Yeah, I made a big move, and that wasn't the only one actually. In fact, I discovered what can happen in OOTP if you start trading washed-up players for money. The fans were shocked when I got rid of Eddie Murray, who should have retired by this point anyway. The point, of course, was to fleece Baltimore. We got a draft pick and $8 million cash for him. We also got rid of John Franco, mostly because good relievers aren't that hard to find in OOTP. We threw in Frank Tanana with this deal. Tanana had no business still pitching in 1993 at age 39. In return, we got a minor leaguer, a draft pick, and $1 million cash. Yep, then we went on our own spending spree, and seriously, I lost control. In came Craig Biggio, who was in the final year of his contract. Then came Will Clark. He was in exchange for the fifth man in our starting rotation. And then we picked up Ken Griffey Jr., giving up only a marginal major league pitcher and a minor leaguer. Griffey, of course, was also in the last year of his contract. We gave up Edgardo Alfonso, who was probably our top prospect, for Randy Johnson and $1,600,000 cash. And we did more than just that. See, after that Alomar trade, I figured that I might as well have some fun with this. Think of it as trying to be more Mets than the Mets really were. We were all about the stars and free agents here, and we put together a team that I was actually really excited for. Alright, check out these starting lineups. It looks like an all-star game lineup, until you get to Howard Johnson, of course. Our starting rotation also looks solid, well, that is, unless you take a close look at how old Sid Fernandez was. As you can guess, we were predicted to finish first in the NL East, and I was really excited. And then I slowly started to clean up house. In retrospect, I really should have started off with this one, getting rid of Chico Walker in exchange for money and a late draft pick. That trade was made in late May, as was this one. Vince Coleman complained that he wasn't starting enough, so we shipped him off to Colorado, essentially for cash. I realized that we needed better depth at catcher, and so I got rid of another draft pick to get Todd Zeile from the Cardinals. He was also in the last year of his contract. But there was something that was still missing. You see, we didn't have any players with that famous captain personality. I've read all sorts of guides that tell me about how important that is, and so I decided to go out and get a captain. For whatever reason, Jeff Reboulet is a captain in this save. I shipped out Jeff Fry, 2 minor leaguers, and a draft pick to get him. The players all took notice now that there was a captain in town. And I guess he showed leadership qualities in real life. Somebody's gonna have to help me out here. One thing is for certain though, the OTP computer manager knows what it has when it has a captain. Negotiations to get this guy were really rough and really long. If I were going to do this again, I would try to get a captain first instead of screwing around with everybody else. Our most controversial trade came on July 1st when I shipped out 21-year-old Butch Husky to Texas in exchange for a 46-year-old Nolan Ryan. It might not have been the best move of all time, but at least the fans liked it. If you didn't pay attention to age, you'd look at this pitching staff with awe. But try as we might, we couldn't get far. We were 7.5 games out on July 19th, and we were running out of time. By the trade deadline, we were still 7 games out. Yeah, about that. So it turns out that dumping all the draft picks and young players for big names might not guarantee wins. And of course, if that win today strategy backfires, you're kind of in trouble. Ken Griffey Jr. was tearing apart National League pitching, but it wasn't helping us out in the standings. Meanwhile, our minor league teams were getting slaughtered. Our AAA team lost 25-0, for example. Now, I should note that I actually did spend a bunch of time reading guides on minor league management and development as I prepared for this save. I really did. In fact, I drew out a diagram of the ages the players should be at each minor league level and so on. But, you know, it's kind of hard to resist the temptation to pick up Will Clark, Ken Griffey Jr., Roberto Alomar, Nolan Ryan, and all the rest. I mean, like I said, the problem that I had here is that these were all the star players when I was a kid. We had an outside chance of sneaking into the pennant in early September. We were only 3 games behind Montreal on September 19th. As late September rolled around, we played like we meant it. Dave Gallagher drove in 2 runs to beat the Cardinals in this game. Riboulet drove in the winning run the next night. And then we shut out the Cardinals the following night. We were mathematically still in the race on September 30th, though we didn't really have a realistic shot at it. Junior knocked in the winning run at our next game in Florida. But sadly, it was too little too late. We wound up only 3 games out at first with an 89-73 record. Hey, well, at least it's better than what the Mets did in real life, right? The big question now, though, is whether we can hold this team together as time goes on. The Expos made short work of the Giants in the NLCS. And Wade Boggs led the New York Yankees past the Seattle Mariners in the ALCS. Yeah, that's right. Seattle went to the ALCS despite the fact that we took Ken Griffey Jr. and Randy Johnson from them. You know, maybe getting the big names wasn't the best strategy after all. In the end, the Montreal Expos fought off a late Yankee rally to win the World Series 4-2. It was kind of surprising, but it was also a fitting end to a wild and wacky season. Despite our big names, we didn't have anybody lead in any offensive categories. None of our pitchers hit the leaderboards either. We did have a number of players on the All-Star team, but then again, that's based mostly on reputation. And I guess my final season score was okay, but it really could have been better. Well, I think that I learned my lesson the hard way. I will say this though, focusing on young players only in OOTP can be really frustrating. The problem is that the computer never wants to trade away its prospects, and it's a lot easier to give up overrated prospects for established stars. Anyway, we're going to have to try this again sometime, and I'll see next time if I can keep myself under control for a change.